Commissioner Ellis.
Judge, thank you. And this is a item that I'm proud to have worked with our county attorney on. And if I might, I want to pass the honors over to him. I just want to say how proud I am of the legacy and the work of Mr. Hainsworth. And if I might, Mr. County Attorney, if you're there, I'd like to pass it to you.
Yep, I'm on. Thank you, Commissioner Ellis, for bringing this forth, and thank you to the court for granting the Law Library and the Harris County Attorney's Office an audience today. Another thank you to Marianne Sears, the Law Library Director, and Sharia McKenzie, the Library's Director of Special Projects, for the work on this. And finally, of course, thank you to the Houston Lawyers Association, which is the Black Lawyer Bar Association in Houston, and which was also founded by Mr. Hainsworth. We're excited that today, during Black History Month, the Harris County Law Library is being rededicated to honor local attorney and civil rights leader Robert Hainsworth. In 1951, when racist Jim Crow laws were still alive and well in Texas, Mr. Hainsworth filed a lawsuit challenging the one-table rule, which was a law library rule requiring African-American attorneys to use a single designated table while working in the law library. This restriction not only inhibited Black lawyers' ability to advocate for their clients, but it was also a constant reminder that although they had excelled in college, graduated from law school, and passed the Texas bar exam, they were still treated as second-class citizens by their government. During the same period that Mr. Hainsworth was fighting for equality through his lawsuit, courts across the country were grappling with reconciling the United States Constitution's promise for equality for all and the practical reality of segregation in the South. In May of 1954, the United States Supreme Court ruled that racial segregation in public schools violated the 14th Amendment, overturning the separate but equal doctrine and laying the predicate for the end of state-sanctioned racial segregation. Just 6 months later, that same court declined to hear Mr. Hainsworth's case against the law library. And while the courts denied his call for equality, his vision blazed the trail for the fight against segregation in our state. So it's only fitting that the law library should be rededicated to acknowledge the victory of that vision. Today's law library is a place where everyone, regardless of race, religion, or gender, has a seat at any table. Rededicating the law library located at 1019 Congress is important for an additional reason. Years ago, the building was the home to the Sidnor Company slave market, one of the largest slave markets in Texas. The halls of justice at 1019 Congress stand not just to the diligence and courage that Mr. Hainsworth exhibited, but also the blood of Black forefathers. I'll end with a quote by Mr. Hainsworth, which was, "The American public expects lawyers to be the first to stand for freedom and democracy and the rights of the individual." To my fellow members of the Texas Bar, to my fellow elected officials, may we continue to fight for freedom, equality, and a more just society. Thank you.
Judge, I'd just like to note that I certainly could not have been as eloquent, but I also want to comment on the significance of Mr. Menifee being not only the youngest, but the first African-American in his position. And we have come a very long way for him to be in a position to dedicate that law library in honor of one of the trailblazers that paved the way for him as well as me and so many others. So thank you. And I'm also proud to be a member of the HLA. And I know there are a number of speakers. Some of them are legends in their own right, by the way. And I'm just glad that so many of them signed up to say something about Mr. Hainsworth.
That's an incredible step. Thank you so much for doing that. Commissioner Garcia. All right,
Judge.
Commissioner Ellis, you had another one, I believe.
Yeah.
Judge, do you want me to do the speakers?
Yes, that'd be great, Lucinda. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sarah Beth Landau, First Court of Appeals. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Beth Landau. I am a justice on the First Court of Appeals, but I'm speaking to you in my capacity as one of the co-chairs of the Harris County Library Committee for the Houston Bar Association. I'm speaking in support of the rededication of the Harris County Library because I think it gives the Houston Bar Association Library Committee a chance to right a historic wrong when it denied Mr. Hainsworth equal access to the library like every other lawyer. And it is a chance for the library to continue its service as a backbone to the community for self-represented litigants as well as lawyers from small firms. And I think Mr. Hainsworth is emblematic of the county law library and give the chance for the values of the library in its service to the community to be reflected on the outside and to continue its excellent service to those who need it most. I want to thank you for your time this morning and for considering this important resolution.
Thank you.
Andrew McGee with Houston Lawyers Association. Go ahead, please.
All right. I listened to the prior speakers, but I want to say that the law library at the time that Hainsworth was practicing sat in the basement of the Civil Courts building. What was the Civil Courts building at the time is now the appellate court's home for the 1st and the 3rd and the 14th. But Hainsworth probably spent hours down there in that library because he was a prodigious suer. He filed a number of lawsuits, but he probably spent many, many hours down there in the basement of the Civil Courts building working on his cases and his practice generally. I didn't know Mr. Hainsworth. I arrived in Houston in 1982. He died in 1981. I've never seen Mr. Hainsworth, but just looking at some of the cases that he's taken to the Supreme Court, I know that he was a student of the law, and the naming of this library would be very appropriate. There may be other members of the bar who spent time in that library or even in the new library, but I'm sure that Mr. Hainsworth spent a great deal of his time down there in that library. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. This is Jack Cagle.
Okay. How you doing, Jack? Cactus Jack?
Doing all right. Good to hear from you again.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Aljanita Scott Davis with the Houston Lawyer Association. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Aljanita Scott Davis, and it is my honor to speak in support of the Harris County Commissioners Court resolution to rededicate the Harris County Law Library in honor of a gentleman who valiantly sought to ensure that the mission of the law library was fulfilled, Robert Wendell Hainsworth. Before Google, Lexis, and other electronic legal sources, the purpose of the library was to provide the resource of information that lawyers practicing in the courtrooms of this county would be able to research the myriad areas of law their clientele deserved. That meant all citizens of Harris County. The vestiges of racism, injustice, and segregation were on greater display in 1949 when Mr. Hainsworth graduated from my alma mater, the Howard University School of Law. This law school was a bold laboratory of Houstonian jurisprudence that trained its students to focus on removing the practices of segregation wherever they existed. The Houstonian School of Jurisprudence was the driving force that made the Howard University School of Law instrumental in laying the groundwork that led to a series of rulings outlawing racial segregation throughout the country. Mr. Hainsworth was blessed to return to school, going from Houston to Washington, D.C., to attend this specially dedicated institution. He returned to his hometown committed to work incessantly to outlaw injustice, practicing in his office in the McDonough Building, 500 Louisiana, where there were many civil rights activists and professionals office down in downtown Houston, near where Beer Paredes is now. As you have read and will hear, Mr. Hainsworth was not dissuaded in his determination. He led the founding of our beloved Houston Lawyers Association so that Negro lawyers could collaborate in their efforts of professional development and civil rights activism. Hainsworth was his sister, Hazel Hainsworth Young, graduated from Howard in 1924. She was on the first faculty of Jack Gates and later my Dean of Women at Phyllis Wheatley High School. Dean Hainsworth Young was the assertive force persuading me to attend Howard University. It was from her that I learned and heard many doting stories about her older brother. As a Wheatleyite from Fifth Ward, I could not have anticipated the legal fire that enveloped her brother, Mr. Hainsworth, would also envelop me and direct me to his HLA, becoming its president, later president of its national affiliate, the National Bar Association, and becoming the general counsel of the Port of Houston Authority for 10 years because of the introduction of the Houston Lawyers Association. Thank you so much for honoring him for what he did for our county and what he did for lawyers like me. But try to follow in his footsteps.
Judge,
Yeah.
I know that number of speakers. Ms. Davis, I want to thank you, and of course, all of them are going to speak, and I won't interrupt on everyone, but she's my resident African-American history historian, so she in part helped me make the decision to try to name something after Curtis Graves, and of course with Mr. Menifee to do this resolution and many others, and Judge Henry Dahl. So Algeria, you don't have to comment on all of them, but I know my predecessor, Senator, Congressman, Representative Washington, I believe is coming on next, but I will be presenting that other one, and of course, Commissioner Garcia has his as well. So for what it's worth, hey, you had to educate me on all that Henry Dahl did, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't know all of that. So just thank you.
It's my privilege. We both love history.
Thank you so much.
My name is Prince Cartwright Jr. I am one of the past presidents of the Houston Lawyers Association, and I want to affirm and support the resolution of rededicating the Harris County Law Library in honor of Mr. Robert Wendell Hainsworth. County Commissioner Ellis, I had the privilege of meeting Mr. Hainsworth because he and his sister, the Hainsworth family, were members of the historic Antioch Baptist Church downtown. And they were not, Mr. Hainsworth was not only a legal scholar, but his sister was a great educator in Houston, Harris County, Texas, Mrs. Hazel Hainsworth Young. I want to say that I'm supportive of the resolution. I had the opportunity of meeting Mr. Hainsworth on one occasion, and he shared with me his vision for young lawyers like me. I was 30 years more young then, had hair on my head, and Mr. Hainsworth instilled in me that we were the social engineers that would pick up the mantle and take up the fight for equality and justice in Harris County. And he shared with me the experiences that he and some of the founders of the Houston Lawyers Association endured during the early 50s, that they were not only segregated, not allowed in the library in the basement, but they were also, their clients were the last persons on the court's docket to be called. And there was certainly an embarrassment to, not having equal justice and equal opportunity at the time. So I think that during the time that I was president of the Houston Lawyers Association, I was able to capture an oral history of some of the founders that were living at the time, Judge Weldon Berry, Judge Matthew Plummer, Mr. Attorney Aloysius Whitcliffe, and Mr. And not Mr. Dahl, but Robertson King, and Judge Francis Williams. So they were all founders of the Houston Lawyers Association, but Mr. Hainsworth was a stallion trailblazer. He was what I admired about him being a self-litigant by himself. He researched, he was a student of the law, and for that reason, I just think that Mr. Hainsworth was a stallion legal trailblazer of Harris County, and this is very appropriate. Thank you so much, and I hope that my sharing this information with you will be forthcoming in a positive affirmative action taking place on the rededication. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cartwright.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellis.
RJ Blue with Houston Lawyers Association. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good morning. I hope I don't have too much background noise in there, but I want to start off by saying that as the current president of the Houston Lawyers Association, on behalf of the Houston Lawyers Association, its current members, as well as the board of directors, we fully support this resolution, and we also thank anyone and everyone who has dedicated any time or resources in trying to get this resolution passed. And that is folks who work directly and indirectly. I want to thank Joseph Lawson, the folks from the Houston Young Lawyers Association, the Houston Area Law Librarians, the Houston Bar Association, as well as Bill Kroger, and the former Secretary of State, James Baker, as well as, again, anybody and everybody who had a hand in trying to get this resolution passed. When I first, like a lot of folks my age, I'm a little younger. I feel like I'm old, but every once in a while I get around some more seasoned attorneys who have more of an intimate connection with the history of the Houston Lawyers Association, as well as many of its founders, including Mr. Hainsworth. I'm humbled to be part of an organization with such a rich history, and I'm even more humbled that the founders of this organization had to deal with things that I would never even imagine having to deal with. A lot of the issues that they had to face when they were practicing law, we don't have to face now, and it's in large part due to their efforts. When reading the bio of Robert Hainsworth, again, I was just taken aback. And I think that all lawyers can find themselves well served by trying to follow in the footsteps of Mr. Hainsworth. Not only was he a servant to the rule of law and trying to use the law to achieve equality for practitioners as well as his clientele, he was also a service member. He was a colonel in the United States Army. The Houston Lawyers Association stands fully prepared to support this resolution and all things subsequent to the passing of this resolution to make sure that we solidify Mr. Hainsworth and the changing of the name of this library and anything and everything that has to do with the library and the resolution afterwards. Also, I'm going to wrap up here and give some of my time back. I had to take a quick break from a deposition, but I want to thank the commissioners, all the commissioners, the county judge, and the commissioners on the commissioners court for allowing us to request this resolution and to speak here today. And I want to give a big special thanks to Commissioner Cagle, because as he knows, and he always reminds me, you'll always be Judge Cagle to me. I've tried a ton of cases, but my very first jury trial was in, I believe it was County Court of Law number 1, if I'm not mistaken, when you were in the county court. And I like to say hi to you again, even though it's only on a telephone call. But thank you, and we're looking forward to supporting all efforts concerning this resolution.
Counselor Blue, I remember you trying that first case. And if you may recall, I commended you for doing such a fabulous job on your first time out of the box. And I was not aware that you'd become the president of the Houston Lawyers Association. You might not be aware of this, but back when I sat on the bench, I was actually a member. And so you're now my president. How's that?
Judge, if I might, should I move to one now for Mr. Hainsworth, or just wait? Do them all at the same time?
We can do that one, Commissioner, if you believe there may be issues with it.
I'll just move adoption.
Second.
A motion, a second for item 236 on page 28 under Commissioner Precinct 1.
Is that approved as presented?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Rededication of the law library in honor of Mr. Robert W. Hainsworth. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And Judge, I didn't call all of the names out, but the public defender, a host of people who worked on that for a long period of time. Thank you to all of them.
Mr. Ellis, thank you for bringing that forward. That's if we don't celebrate history like that, we're going to forget history.
Thank you.
The thing about history, unfortunately, that wasn't that long ago. So when things like that happen in Houston, we saw the effects of that all the way up in my hometown of Crockett, Texas. So thank you for that. And Christian, thank you for bringing that forward. Thank you.